The Canadian Agri-Food Policy Institute is driving bold policy solutions for a resilient Canadian agri-food system and building a stronger future for Canadian agriculture. Visit capi-icpa.com to discover how.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147 at Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Friday edition of the show. Thanks so much for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. And, of course, everybody, a big shout to you that are downloading the RealAg Radio podcast and listening to that as well. As today is Friday, so it means we'll have a quick bonus segment as well to continue on the conversation with the RealAg Issues Panel. We're broadcasting today from Denver, Colorado. I'm giving the opening keynote today at the Colorado Farm Bureau meeting. Looking forward to that very, very much. And it's a beautiful day in Denver, but there's a lot of issues to discuss here on the program for Canada and the U.S. There's a lot happening in the world of agriculture, besides just Shaun zipping around on an airplane from place to place, which is exactly what it's been the last 9-10 days. Today on the RealAg Issues Panel, we've got Lyndsey Smith and Kelvin Heppner of RealAgriculture. We're going to bring them in just a second. We'll also have a beef market update today with Wasko, the Gateway Livestock Exchange. Curious on what's been happening in the cash market relative to some of the comments the president made 2-3 weeks ago about trying to bring down the price of beef. We heard more about this week. We've got some tariffs being removed, increases of TRQs, especially as it applies to that Argentine beef, but now talk about Brazilian tariffs on beef also being lowered, trying to bring more of that South American beef into the U.S. That's going to have an impact on the North American markets, but how much? We'll talk to Ann about that. If you have any feedback on today's show, send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also call or text the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Let's do something a little bit different. Let's bring in the panel. Let's bring him in here, and let's get started. Up first, we got Kelvin Heppner coming out of Otona, Manitoba. How are we doing today, Kelvin?
Doing well here, Shaun. You mentioned the bonus at the end of the show in the podcast version, and we are well into the bonus of the growing season here in southern Manitoba. If you look back a month ago, a lot of expectation that we wouldn't get much fertilizer down or field work done this fall, and the last couple of weeks here have been quite friendly for getting a lot of that field work done, and we'll take a lot of the pressure off of the spring rush when it comes to fertilizer, the retail supply chain, and getting field work done. So, yeah, it's things are good around here.
Well, on that note, I'll bring in Lyndsey Smith from Ottawa, Ontario. Lyndsey, can you believe it? We are a little over a month away from Christmas.
I know. I'm pretty excited, to
be
honest. I am, actually.
There's lots to do in the meantime.
There is, but I will say, so we're having the opposite fall of what Kelvin's having, where it's like snow early, cold, freezing rain. We haven't got a whole bunch of things done. And there is something about like the holiday season of like everybody just slowing down. And once the rush is over, having that quiet time. So I am sort of looking forward to that. I will say, as kind of crummy as November has been, it is flying. And I'm sort of glad. I don't love November, so it'll be 10. Although, next week, of course, American Thanksgiving. So very exciting for all of you who participate in the double dip.
Yeah, I'm doing the double dip for sure, without question.
I made start just because. I just really like turkey and pumpkin pie, so why not?
Wife's got the turkey planned out. Some of the boys are coming in from college.
I'm telling you, yeah.
You got a couple friends coming from college. We got a football game to go to. We got a hockey game to go to. We're double dipping.
Yeah, do it. I have to say, just since we last spoke, Shaun, I can't believe what has all transpired in like the 7 days. All the places you have been, you got to talk to the Alberta lamb producers, which very jealous.
Yeah.
There was a Grey Cup. There was it's just been madness this week. It's wild.
I had such a good time, Lyndsey, with the Alberta land producers last Saturday.
So
I did a speech. Yeah. Listen, here's the reality. I know about issues and things that are happening. I don't know anything about lamb. And I didn't hold that back. Like, I was honest with them.
Yeah.
Everything I know about sheep production is through this person, Lyndsey, who and they all knew you. They all knew you.
Oh, yay! That's
they
great.
did. Yes,
I think we presented to them over Zoom once.
Anyway. Okay, yeah, they were a great group, very very interactive, had lots of questions, and just talking about the future of the land, because we talked about like how beef profits right now are really good.
Yeah.
But also what's good, and you're holding back, you're sort of sandbagging us. The lamb price has been quite good as well. Margins are good in that industry, and they saw optimistic, they were optimistic about the future and where this industry could go from a demand standpoint.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, yeah, prices have been good. I would prefer to talk margin and profit margin than prices, because lamb margins are not the same as cattle margins. Just so
they are not. No, they are not. But they're good.
Yeah, they are not. But I mean, like feed prices have been down, lamb prices are up. So, and yes, I would completely agree. There's a fantastic outlook for lamb production in this country, across the board. So there's definitely potential. Absolutely.
Well, I got an email from one of our listeners, Bob, yesterday, and he said more sheep talk. So, Bob, I came through. We just had a little bit of a segment talking about what's going on in the lamb industry.
Thanks, Bob.
And, appreciate it. It's all good. I even ran into a lamb producer last night at the reception here at the Farm Bureau meeting. So that was also a solar grazer, by the way. Also a solar grazer.
We're growing in numbers. Look out.
Yeah, it's like a little secret pact. They got like a secret handshake, Kelvin, and everything that's going on.
We're great people.
There is a lot that has happened here over the course of the last week. And if you remember, last week I was in Ottawa when we did the show, and broadcasting from the Prime Minister's suite at the Fairmont Laurier. Today, not as spectacular, but it's hey, you can't go wrong with a Hyatt. If you're going to be on the road like I am, the Hyatt feels a little bit like home. It's a little bit more like home. That's a bit of a commercial there for Hyatt. Hey, let's do this. What we're going to do is you guys are going to go backstage. You're going to listen to Ann and I do the beef market update and talk about what's going on in the cattle market, and then we'll come back with the RealAg Issues Panel. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
Soil health is under pressure, but real solutions start below the surface. Black Earth offers a full suite of humic solutions, from high-purity granules to powder, liquid, and soluble formulations, all powered by pure Humulite. Formulated for performance, backed by consistency, trusted by growers worldwide from one of the world's rarest reserves. Grow stronger with the power of Black Earth Humulite. Learn more from Mine to Market at blackearth.com.
It's now time for our product spotlight with Canterra Seed, joined right now by Scott Peters, Territory Manager for Western Manitoba and Southeastern Saskatchewan. You've had a big year with your canola lineup, and CS 4100LL seems to be getting a lot of attention out there. What's been standing out about that hybrid?
I think guys needed to see it perform in the field this year. I got to see it in trials all last year, so I was super confident in the pod shatter genetics in it, but that was the big feedback I'm getting so far. It's exceeded expectations on the pod shatter, and on yield, that was the consistency that we needed to see this fall. It was really, really strong.
And how do you keep earning that trust year after year?
Sales nowadays isn't just a transaction anymore. You're not texting out pricing. If you want to build trust and repeat business, you got to be side by side with the growers, and a lot of the time you end up friends with them. There's a really good supply of the 4100. We did come out with a brand new 4200 as well, a little less supply on it, but the 4100, it's selling strong, but we got strong supply as well. You can go to Canterra.com. All the territory managers are on the website, all of our contact information, emails. You can also find a list of all the retailers that deal our products as well.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. As promised, let's do the beef market update. And let's bring in Ann Wasko, the Gateway Livestock Exchange. Ann, how are we doing?
Well, we've had better weeks, but I personally am just fine.
Good. Yeah, it has been a difficult week for the cattle markets. I will say this. I've been getting a bunch of audience feedback. There was an audience member that said, you know what, I'm a young cow-calf producer. My favorite things about RealAg Radio is hearing Ann Wasko. Why is she only on every 2 weeks? I want her to be every week. So you're in demand. And the way these markets are moving, we may have to change that. So, hey, what's going on in these cattle markets here? Just break it down for us. Of course, there's a lot of variables, but what's up?
As you know, and the listeners know, I like to start with that cash. It just gives us a place to start. And it was a tough week, Shaun, as I alluded to already. So in Texas, we're down $4 to $6 this week, $2.22 to $2.24. Nebraska was also off, $2.15 to $2.18. Their dressed market's $10 lower, 340 to 345. So the market certainly has had this bearish vibe for some time. Well, literally since October the 14th, if you want to be specific. And it's just really struggled to get past the worry and the uncertainty of all this news, which we'll talk about. But let me get through my known stats. Cutout is, of course, following this, and this is a bit of a concern. So the choice was off $2. 371 was the number last night. And why it's a little bit of a concern to me, Shaun, is that this is normally when we would have had some of that up heading into U.S. Thanksgiving next week and the holiday season in December. So I think a good word is it's been very disappointing, that wholesale market, which then leads you to wonder, is that being affected by a disappointing retail market? And so all those demand pieces have got big question marks behind them. Let's put it that way. At this time of year, it should have been better than it is. But granted, we came off the best prices ever going into October. Cattle feeders in both countries are behind in terms of their marketing. So carcass weights have gotten big. Record weights 2 weeks ago in the U.S. and record weights for us here in both in Alberta and Ontario. So it's showing you these slower marketing, smaller kills. We aren't getting through the cattle. And that just is an added weight. Over the years that you and I have talked, Shaun, that's always an added weight to the market. So that's happening. We are going to finally start to see, and you've talked about other commodities, but start to see some U.S. government reports out. Today will be the U.S. cattle on feed report. The guesstimates for this afternoon's report down 2% for the numbers on feed on November 1st, and both placements and marketing's down 8%. And again, Shaun, it's going to really show, I think, when it comes out this afternoon, that the placements into the southern U.S., because of that Mexican border still being closed, down, but we've seen placements into the northern tier states, especially Nebraska feeding areas, up. So very different regional placements, and we'll talk more about Mexico in a second. Or are you're looking like you want to jump in?
I want to ask, I just want to clarify, did you say the box beef price is also receded this week?
Yes. Down two.
Okay, so here's what's kind of fascinating. If we see, right now we have packers losing a lot of money, okay? Now, if the box beef price held and the price to the producer went down, then we're actually, some of the things the president has done here at the White House level is going to, is trying to rectify some of the losses that packers have. But if we have the box beef price coming down, got to watch that retail price. If that retail price stays sticky because there's a lot of demand in the grocery store, and the grocery industry doesn't accommodate what the president wants, all that's happened is we've put more margin in large grocers.
Can happen. And of course, again, because we're missing data, and one of them is that retail data in the U.S., we can only speculate. But you're right on. Right, the tree you're barking up, you're right on. Okay. I do want to talk about the local market. I'm gonna
go ahead.
I'm gonna agree to just what we were off as well. Steady to 3 lower, dressed in Alberta, 490 to 495. There was some live trade at 295, so that'll be off a wee bit from last week. And as I mentioned, our weights are big too. If you're a cow-calf producer, and obviously there's some listening, that market did appear to find some stability this week on the calf market. It had come down quite a bit over the previous 3 or 4 weeks, but it did look like it found some stability because numbers are certainly smaller, as we know in Western Canada. One thing we do have, I won't get into details on it, but CanFax did release their Western Canadian cattle on feed report for November 1st last Friday. And in a nutshell, Shaun, on-feed numbers continue to be up a wee bit. And that tells me placements were down a wee bit. But that certainly tells me we continue, even though we don't have trade numbers since August because of the government shutdown. We'll get them shortly. But my guess is that feeder imports have continued to roll north because we've got 1% or more cattle on feed in Western Canada. So that's going to be my guess, but we'll confirm that when we get some numbers out. I think, looking at the futures market this morning, lots of volatility, lots of uncertainty, hugely frustrating, but the market's just simply trying to deal with all of this news that's coming out of the U.S. in terms of this might happen, this might happen, this might happen. One of them that has happened overnight is the Brazilian tariffs, the tariffs on Brazilian beef and other products, but in our case, beef, have been removed, the extra tariff. So this is the tariff that was placed back in July, if you will.
Yep.
And that was kind of the markets. If you look at a chart, Shaun, that was the launching point for a lot of these, the commodities on the cattle and live cattle and feeder cattle side. So if that launching point, if we're now that factor, that policy has now been reversed, the market's trying to get back to that level, in my opinion. So that's what's going on. That's one of them. The other one, I think you had a listener kind of reach out to you on the Mexican topic.
Yes.
So maybe reverbiage the question.
I don't have it. I don't have it in front of me, but
okay.
It was about.
I think it was basically, how many are we going to expect to cross the border, when the border does reopen between Mexico and the U.S. Just as a reminder, historically, kind of 1.2 to 1.4 million head of feeders have moved from Mexico into the U.S. on an annual basis. And of course, it's been, for the most part, closed for all of 25. So I guess I thought, first of all, when you sent it through, great question, and I wish I had a better answer because we don't know the reopening date yet. The markets are trying to, guess when that might happen. Sometime in 26, I think we can all agree to that, but when? Is it January? Is it April? Is it further along? So that's the hardest thing. But in response specifically to the question, that once the border does reopen, I do think the U.S. will go back to their regular way of business, i.e. bringing those lighter cattle in to grow and finish, as they have over the last many years. So I do think that gets returned. It's not like those cattle are gone. We've always got we've got the old crop calves and then we'll have the new crop calves. So I do think that will return quite quickly. The economics, I guess that's where I'm leaning, Shaun. The economics are going to support that, i.e. feeder cattle market much stronger in the U.S. than that in Mexico. So that's why those cattle move north, and that's why we'll return to moving feeders as soon as that border opens.
Man, I'll tell you what, if it wasn't the market uncertainty and volatility and the political risk here now, because here's the thing, the White House is doing this today, or, on this moment here in November 21st, it doesn't mean that on November 26th, there's not a reversal and a policy change. And this becomes very, very difficult for ranchers and feeders to try to steer through this. It's especially when there is so much risk on the table from a pricing perspective.
Well, right. And especially when some of these policies, they obviously they impact supply when we start talking about Mexican cattle and or Brazilian beef, but then other things talking about retail beef prices are too high. Well, then that's a demand worry, right? And so that's why the market's having all of these reactions and big reactions. The market's off hard today. So understandably, the markets don't know what to do. They're trading off in this uncertainty, and it's very frustrating for sure.
And thanks so much for joining us here today for the Beef Market Update.
Okay, thanks, Shaun.
She's the best. And Wasko, Gateway Livestock Exchange. We'll get back to the RealAg Issues Panel right after this. And welcome back for this product spotlight with Syngenta Canada. Our guest is Wayne Bennett, product marketing manager. And he's here to talk about what you get in the box when you buy your crop protection inputs.
Not only are we focused on bringing new technology, but a big part of our focus behind the scenes is about how do we maintain that existing technology. And our team of scientists behind the scenes is continually updating that level of science to ensure that we have freedom to operate and market access.
Wayne, that's an interesting point because I think a lot of farmers, people in the industry, just assume like product XYZ is approved in Canada, farmers are using it, and that's just the way it stays. But that's not the case. How often does this review come up?
Essentially every 15 years. However, there could be some science that happens in other parts of the world that will trigger a special review here locally. A review can happen at any given time, but a cyclical review happens every 15 years.
Highly encourage all of our audience out there to, when you walk into your local retail, to make sure you're asking about Syngenta product.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
Okay, now that we're all caught up here in what's going on in the beef markets, we're going to get back to the RealAg Issues Panel. But first, in the midst of significant global and domestic upheaval, we have an opportunity to leverage agriculture and food as a strategic driver of economic growth and prosperity for Canadians. Join agriculture industry leaders in Calgary December 2nd through the 4th to explore how Canada can meet the moment and unleash the true potential of Canadian agriculture and food. Visit growcanadaconference.ca to register now. Okay, let's bring him back in. We got Kelvin Heppner, Lyndsey Smith, all of RealAgriculture. Kelvin, you were on the road this week as well.
That's right. It is definitely meeting season here, and I had the chance to attend and moderate, be on stage a little bit at the Hemp Canada, the Canadian Hemp Trade Alliance meeting. Took place in Winnipeg this week, and certainly when you talk about economic growth potential and cutting red tape, which is both things that the Canadian government right now says it's focused on. There's probably not many poster childs like the hemp industry that are looking at cutting regulation or reducing regulatory burden and that type of thing. So I think a timely discussion about unlocking, and this is something that I know the hemp industry has talked about for decades now, going back to 1998. But unlocking kind of that next level of growth and potential in the hemp industry in Canada and in the U.S. There's certainly big things happening in the U.S. with the funding bill a couple of weeks ago. There's a provision in there that has a lot of things up in the air right now when it comes to the future of industrial hemp in the U.S. And so kind of a lot of people talking about where things may fall as the dust settles on that hemp funding provision as well.
Would you say a good comparison is the hemp industry in North America has a lot of promise, but is continually kind of chasing its potential? Kelvin, does it remind you of the Toronto Maple Leafs?
Well, I don't know if I hadn't made that comparison, no, but yeah, in some ways you're right. Hemp is such an amazing crop. It has so many different uses, and whether you're talking food, fiber, making concrete with hemp fiber, making fiberglass with hemp fiber in it, or the CBD realm, which of course blew up in 2018, 2019, and has since come back down to earth with the U.S. Farm Bill at the time opening things up south of the border. And then here in Canada, we had the legalization of cannabis and opportunities that people saw there. Things have certainly come back down to earth there, but hemp is this, and that's one of the things about it, and this meeting that I got to attend this week. You've got people doing multiple different things, going in different directions with this same crop. So how do you tie that back to the production stage at the farm level? You've got to have different varieties for different things. And so in many ways, it's many different crops within one plant type. And so, yeah, it is fascinating. And there is lots of potential, but again, regulations around CBD and THC levels and all of that complicate things. And certainly the industry continues to push for moving it more under Agriculture Canada than under Health Canada. And it doesn't seem we had a representative from Health Canada on stage talking about where things are at from a regulatory perspective. There is progress and signs that Canada could approve hemp seed meal in livestock rations as a feed ingredient perhaps in the next year sometime. But yeah, lots of potential still. And I know there's been big dollars spent chasing that potential for decades, and some companies have seen success. But yeah, it's one of those. It is kind of like the Leafs in some ways. I'm not sure the Leafs have that many different tools in their toolbox as what hemp has as potential though right now.
Okay, so just sidebar really quickly. Are the Leafs going to fire their coach?
I don't know. It's a non-zero chance, I'd say right now. The talk is starting, and it does seem like he's maybe lost a little bit of effectiveness in the room right now.
Well, as a Calgary Flames fan, they're ahead of Calgary, which is not hard because Calgary's in dead last. Dead last. We're in the Gavin McKenzie.
They're about 500 record right now. I think they have a 500 record right now, the Leafs do.
Which puts them near the bottom of the conference, though. Because the Eastern
Yeah,
Conference is a lot stronger than the Western.
They're second.
Yeah.
They're second in their conference. It's second last. Sorry.
Second,
And Ottawa is tied. Yeah, is tied for. There's a 3-way tie in the second place of that conference, and Ottawa's in there.
Last Friday when I was in Ottawa at that biofuel meeting, ran into RealAg fan and community member Ruben Stone, who also I believe was at that hemp meeting.
I talked to him this week too at the hemp meeting.
He's almost my neighbor. Yeah. He's great.
Ruben's
good. Fantastic. And super smart guy and just fascinating to talk to because he is definitely someone who understands all these different parts and components and actually grows the crop and processes and right. So it's, fascinating guy.
And also we have to, if we're talking about Ruben, we have to talk about his wife, Keenan, kind of ran was one of the people that ran the event this week. The whole hemp conference she was behind the scenes.
And they also have like 22 children. So I don't know. Okay. It's like 4, but still, I don't know how they are like, just an amazing family that does so much stuff, and I don't know how they do it all. So hats off to the Stones.
For our listeners that send me text on the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147, and say, I want you to talk about something else than just canola, wheat, pulses, and corn. We've fulfilled it so far in the show. We've talked about lamb. Yeah. We've also talked about hemp. Next, we're going to go to the cherry market and talk about what's going on there. No, just kidding. The budget that was passed this week, right?
Oh, yeah, that also happened this week.
Yeah, narrowly. Yeah. We had a few.
Narrowly.
We had a few. We even had a conservative MP that abstained, Shannon Stubbs.
Two.
Apparently, she had surgery or something.
2 of them.
Two of them.
Yeah,
well,
so two. Okay. So one had a
had a medical.
So one had a medical reason.
Okay. Yeah. So, Lyndsey, what's your thoughts on that? What's the takeaways? Because I'll tell you what, some of the audience I saw this week not happy about the deficit. They're like.
Well,
bringing some heat.
And I don't know, can anybody be happy about it? I don't know that any of us should be. I will say, now that sort of some of the dust has settled, we had the 2 conservative MPs, one of which has said that he's quitting. So I guess we'll see if he actually participates in votes going forward until the spring. We're not sure. And then there were 2 NDP that abstained. And of course, Elizabeth May, the lone Green Party, she voted in favor. Can anyone be okay with this deficit? I don't think so. Did anyone? Yes, there's a group of Canadians, I'm sure, that would want an election because they're always going to want an election until their particular party is in power. I get that. But I think overall, most Canadians did not want an election over this budget. Maybe spring, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that this minority parliament is going to live very long. At the same time, I don't think anybody had an appetite for an election. And whether that was the electorate, whether that's Canadians, or whether that was any of the political parties, really the Liberals were the only ones who were in a good position if they did. Everybody else, I think, had a lot to lose or is basically broke. So there's that too. But at the same time, it does mean that so this budget does pass. So some of these things are going to start rolling, and we're seeing evidence of that. And it will. One of the reasons why I don't know if this will be a long-lived parliament is yes, it's a minority, but also. It's a huge deficit, and there's a big wager that some of these, big picture pieces are going to come together and deliver, and the clock is ticking. Like some of them are going to have to actually show promise and actually get rolling, or I don't know that anyone's going to be terribly okay with what's happening policy-wise and under this budget.
Well, I think the table is sort of turned here. You look at the election in the springtime, the number one concern for Canadians, listen, it was the factor that really launched Carney to be the prime minister and do that, one of the biggest turnarounds in political history. It was President Trump. But if you look at Abacus's data now, the Trump factor is number 5 on the concern of Canadians. It is now the rising cost of living, which is a similar issue to what's happening in the U.S. We've seen some change in strategy from the White House because of food prices and living expenses in the U.S. Same sort of thing. Canadians and Americans very much on the same parallel path there. So for Carney, he's going to need to deal with the living or the rising cost of living, Kelvin, and the economy. If he doesn't do that, I think we could be headed to some sort of an election in the first part of 2026.
Yeah, and I think he may want an election to try to secure a majority and extend his term before things turn, or before some real pain is felt from the impact of this budget. Certainly, this budget didn't have a lot of consumer level carrots in it, and we've talked about that before. It's more of an economist budget where it's about creating jobs and just trying to drive investments in business creation and that type of thing. The deficit certainly, though, is inflationary, and to bring back our old favorite word, or my old favorite word, to this show, when governments are way overspending, that drives inflation, and so that doesn't help with cost of living and in the long term. And so, yeah, it'll be interesting to see, and I think we'll start to also see some more news trickle out from this in terms of actual legislation that's required to implement some of what was announced in the budget, the follow through, and actually putting these things in place, these measures. Also, the cuts. Most of the departments, or a lot of departments, were forced or told to come up with plans for reducing costs by 15%, and that includes Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. And I know that the department has some all-staff meetings coming up here that there is some nervousness about, or apprehension among the agriculture staff about what the future looks like for their roles and the work that Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada does, what type of research they're working on, whether that impacts plant breeding. I think there's a good chance that it will, at least on some front. We know the Living Labs program is going to be wound down, and there's talk about science investment in the science activities of Ag Canada also being reduced in the budget. So we'll definitely be tuned to any developments on that front as that starts to come out. And again, that may not all be positive for Carney and re-election chances either, if there's an election around the corner.
Yeah, a lot of people wondering this week. I heard from a lot of listeners, asking me, what is the federal government getting out of plant breeding? What does that look like? And I think every industry, farmers, all kind of asking. That's an example of a question that people are waiting for more details on for sure. So, okay.
I don't think it's a yes or no. I think it's in the middle somewhere, where in some crop types or plant types it could happen and others not.
Well, we're going to take a break, but first, Lyndsey, you know how we always used to have some fun with ratemyconferencecoffee.com? Mm-hmm. Like we always talk, we would want to do that. I think what we should start is ratemyreceptionbuffet.com.
This is a great idea.
It's a great idea because there's some great reception buffets and there's some bad ones. Last night, epic. Colorado Farm Bureau, big shout out to them. A nacho bar.
Brilliant.
Who can complain about nachos? Like that is...
The hemp group had I believe it was a poutine bar this week.
Also,
and the venue was a 120-year-old theater, which was for a farm show.
Pretty cool.
It's quite the historic venue.
Pretty cool stuff. Okay, you're listening to RealAg Radio. It is Shaun, Lyndsey, and Kelvin. We'll be back right after this. And welcome back to RealAg Radio here with Acadian Plant Health. We have Andreas Reyes-Gage, Regional Technical Manager, also responsible for business development in Canada, Loren Davis. What is Acadian Plant Health?
We harvest seaweed out of the Atlantic Ocean. We create a product that farmers can apply either as a seed treatment or foliar on their crops to help deal with crop stresses, abiotic stress, and help that plant be healthier.
What's the one piece of advice that you give to the Real Agriculture audience that is interested in trying out a biostimulant?
It is very important to remember that not all biostimulant products are the same and not all of them are going to be doing the same thing. So you need to choose carefully about exactly what you want from this product.
Loren, what would your advice be?
I think biostimulants, they're a great fit. They do have an opportunity in broadacre crops. They're not a silver bullet. They're not going to replace your fertilizer or your fungicide or your herbicides, but they can be integrated to be a nice addition.
You go to acadianplanthealth-na.com. From nutrient management to the latest weather, market, and ag trends, The Dirt, an economics podcast, is your place for farm-smart topics to boost your profitability. Join host Mike Howell on Season 4 of The Dirt podcast, available now at nutrien-economics.com. Mike Howell does a fantastic job. I was with him probably a few weeks back, maybe even a month now, in Raleigh, North Carolina at an event, and he does a great job really covering agronomic issues across North America. Okay, let's get back to the RealAg Issues Panel. Kelvin Heppner, Lyndsey Smith, all of Real Agriculture, and hey, let's hone in a little bit on, provide a bit of a trade update. I guess, Kelvin, one thing is, it feels, at least from a North American perspective, there's a bit of a softening. I don't know how to best describe it. In terms of the future of the CUSMA, the USMCA trading relationship, there's a lot of anxiety about what's in front of this trade agreement heading up until July 1st of 2026 or July 4th. I'm not sure which one it is. But it seems like there's a bit of a softening right now.
Certainly, the tide has turned, or the pendulum is swinging back the other way after months of anxiety and consternation about the future of the North American Trade Pact, especially north of the border, but also in U.S. states and areas, industries that are reliant on complementary supply chains or integrated supply chains.
You're welcome.
That involve Canada and Mexico. But yeah, I think the tide has definitely turned. We are seeing in a lot of the submissions to the U.S. trade representatives review or consultations ahead of the upcoming USMCA CUSMA review, a lot of the submissions were in favor of keeping this deal. We saw the Canadian Agri-Food Trade Alliance members, so commodity groups across all the export-focused sectors of Canadian agriculture were in Washington, D.C. this week. And the feedback I'm getting from the people that were in D.C. was that congressmen, especially or congresspeople, including those in the Republican Party, do not want to have to bring forward new legislation around USMCA. They would like to just have a few tweaks to it and keep the deal. And I think also we're also seeing a bit of a tide turn within the Trump movement, where Trump doesn't have as tight a grip on the Republican Party as he did even just a couple of weeks ago. Some of this has to do with the Epstein files. We're also seeing backtracking on tariff policy, as you mentioned earlier, Shaun, where they're reducing tariffs. There's talk about these tariff rebate checks, that type of thing. So in some ways, maybe cooler heads prevailing on a lot of the trade policy front, North America-wise, at least trending in that direction here over the last couple of weeks.
Now, it'd be interesting to know which Republicans they met with, because there can be some cheating there. Meeting with Senator Paul out of Kentucky or Congressman Bacon out of Nebraska, very pro-free trade. So all Republicans are not, but it'd be interesting to see what the list was and who they met with. But that sounds like that's encouraging what you're saying, though.
I think compared to earlier visits to DC, though, where people were nervous about saying anything about being pro-free trade or pro-USMCA, there was noticeably more openness about showing support for North American trade and this deal going forward than there was in the months prior.
What I'm voting for, whatever they do, whatever the review looks like, we find one acronym. I am so tired of having to stumble over providing both acronyms. Thank goodness we have no listeners in Mexico.
Oh, there's also TMEC.
I know.
I was going to say
leaving TMEC out of this.
We should just start using TMEC. Yeah.
Well, so we also saw this week, Lyndsey, Premier Moe was in D.C. And to Kelvin's point, for him to meet with USTR Greer, I think that's a bit of a signal. Okay, that's a signal.
Yeah.
The fact he got that meeting does not happen in April. And I think that's a bit of a sign as well.
Yeah. So, and that's like, if you look at this week as a whole, that is where I think, like, individually, these are very good, sort of good news stories for the Canadian side and honestly for the North American market. And individually, yes, really important. But when you take it on the whole, and I'll be speaking with Michael Harvey of CAFTA later today, so watch RealAgriculture.com and our podcast feed for that discussion as well. But, to have Scott Moe have that meeting, to hear, relatively positive things come out of that, like, these are key people in key industries, in key placements, actually sitting down and actually meeting. I think that overall, I don't know if I would say a tide is turning per se, but I feel like the current has maybe shifted a little, that we are also seeing some of the feedback on the CUSMA USMCA agreement, what should happen in the review. We're starting to get what is on the record of what different groups are saying, what they like, what they don't like, whatever. And overwhelmingly, what is consistent between this is that there are benefits to the American economy to have a North American market. And like from several different industries, sure, there are outliers that say, no, they want, they like the New Deal or or the way that Trump has been running things. But overwhelmingly, there is, look, there are good things in USMCA for America, and they want those things to stay, like from the American component. So I think that overall, like, if you take this week as a whole, it's incredibly positive to, at least a understanding that the North American market has benefits, and throwing that all out the window is not necessarily in America's best interest.
There's one thing I am concerned about, there is a positive swing that happened this week too in terms of North American trade relations. One of the things I'm concerned about is policy scope creep. And so one of the things I'm concerned about as it applies to the reduction of the tariffs specifically on Argentine and Brazilian beef. There's a big pushback in farm country amongst beef producers about this. They're not happy, okay? They don't like it. Now, the impact it's going to have on the market, we'll have to see, and we talked to Ann about this, but they're concerned. And in order to fix that, I think we're going to see potentially a big renewed push we need to make sure Americans know where this beef is coming from. And that's fine if that arrow is pointed towards Brazil. It will be a real deterrent and a problem if it's also pointed up north to Canada. We saw this in the Product of USA label changes. Uruguayan beef coming into the U.S. It's in a box. It's packaged in a box. The box is unpacked. It's repacked, and they put a Product of USA label on it. Well, that's terrible policy. That needs to be changed. But as they fix that, then we got the strictest label in the whole world in regarding Product of USA, and that impacted Canadian and Mexican beef, for example, inside of the USMCA. So that's something I am worried about and following closely. The other positive
and that's nonpartisan. And that's both sides of the aisle.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The other positive, though, this week, last Friday at the biofuel conference, there was no chance. I was hearing from people, no chance this 50% RIN cut was going to be changed. Okay, so Canadian feedstocks are considered domestic feedstocks in the U.S. under the Big Beautiful Bill. But there's this 50% RIN cut. No chance of it. What people are hearing from D.C., this is not changing. And it's not going back to full value. This week, President Trump meets with the small refiners, and all of a sudden, maybe we need to delay this 50% RIN cut. That's a positive for Canadian feedstocks. U.S. farm groups are going to push back hard on that because they're concerned about China and UCO, right? And so you can see how all these global pieces sort of fit together and how a fight between the U.S. and Brazil, U.S. and China, how that potentially impacts trade between Canada and the U.S. Just trying to put that all together for you. Okay, we got to take a break. We're going to be back with more of the RealAg Issues Panel right after this.
Built on over 100 years of seed innovation and unwavering commitment to farmers, Pioneer 100 Series canola hybrids deliver a step change in yield performance and agronomic traits. This isn't just better canola. It's different canola. Pioneer 100 Series. Contact your local Pioneer sales representative or visit pioneer.com/100 series to learn more today.
I'm Lyndsey Smith, host of The Agronomist, and I want to thank you for tuning in for over 200 episodes of our beloved little program. Join me Monday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern on YouTube for our live and interactive agronomy Q&A. Each week, our guest panel will handle some of your toughest agronomic questions live, streaming on YouTube, Facebook, X, and RealAgriculture.com. Tune in Monday nights or go to RealAgriculture.com/agronomist and sign up for our email notifications and don't miss an episode.
With deep roots in agriculture, MMP helps farm businesses make confident financial decisions. From planning to growth, their advisors are here to support your success. Learn more at mmp.ca. Okay, we got the RealAg Issues Panel, Kelvin Heppner, Lyndsey Smith, your host, Shaun Haney. And Lyndsey, in talking to audiences on this run of 7 speeches in 9 days, which, when an artist goes on tour like for a year,
Mm-hmm.
and they're like doing shows every night. I have, after doing seven speeches, which is like an hour, and a little bit longer because sometimes it goes longer and you moderate a panel while you're there. But 7 events in 9 days, I couldn't imagine how like some of those artists, after doing it for like a year, 5 nights a week, they would be exhausted. I'm tired.
Are you saying you need a bus? You need a tour bus.
Well, I tweeted, I put on X earlier this week that private jet would be great. Just a little bit out of my price.
We don't have that kind. I was going to say, we don't have that budget. How's a bus? We're going back to the bus.
Yeah.
Are you building a collection of local sporting team jerseys with your last name on it, like the artists do these days, where they go into that wardrobe change and come out with the local hockey team or football team jersey on?
You know what? I think that would have been a really
missed opportunity, Sean.
That would have been a really good thing to do today at Colorado Farm Bureau. You know, Bo Nix and I walk out on stage together. Just sort of like, is it Morgan Wallen that does that, right? With all the local celebrities.
I feel like, he would be one of them, but I think there's a lot of artists that do that these days, where they don the even comedians are doing it. It's What would you go with football, or what would you wear in Denver?
Yeah, I'm in Denver. I would go Broncos. Like, John Elway. Yeah. Okay. John Elway and I walk on stage, and we do like a wrestling entrance, and like the music's pumping, and absolutely.
Of course, wrestling. Anyway.
How about in Saskatoon?
In Saskatoon, well, that's a tough one, because you obviously can go Riders, but that's kind of more of a Regina. Like Regina, feels more fitting for Regina. The Saskatoon lacrosse team.
I was going to say the lacrosse team or the Blades. You got to go Western Hockey League, maybe.
You want to go there? Who would be the most legendary Saskatoon Blade?
I should know, but I
that's some ChatGPTing after the show that we need to.
There you go.
But it honestly met so many great producers, farmers, ranchers, industry people from just such a wide geography. It is. I'm talking about how the energy level and the tiredness of it all, but it has been awesome. It has been awesome, and getting to meet and hear people's stories. And you guys know this too, that you're there to provide insight. And here's what I think. But I think honestly the real value is also taking questions and learning from the audience. And I am not somebody that, somebody makes a statement where you're like, you talk, you see that a lot where speakers like, oh no, you're wrong. Right? I think it's just an opportunity for learning. Like I think in a lot of these things that we're trying to deal with in agriculture, there's no right or wrong answer. Like, just what's your perspective? I really feed off that. I think it's very, very fascinating, and it's an opportunity for people to be heard as well. So, okay. And so in these speeches, one of the things we've talked a lot about is farm profitability. And the big concern for a lot of farmers is the price of fertilizer. And like, price of fertilizer is on the rise. I have a chart in today's presentation looking at fertilizer as a percent of farm expenses. And it's actually a little bit rolled over, but that's not because fertilizer prices are going down. That's because overall expenses are going up for the farmer, which is really creating this margin crunch, Lyndsey.
Yeah. And I mean, this isn't totally unexpected or a surprise, but that doesn't make it any easier to deal with.
Or right.
This is definitely, right. Exactly. Like it sort of feels a little bit like insult to injury, but it absolutely speaks to, just the importance of understanding your cost of production, understanding your ROI on different products, and really recognizing, like maybe there needs to be some larger, you really do have to look at your overall operation. And we know that we can't rapidly necessarily change our fixed costs. So it means that we do spend a lot of time looking at, our cost of production and our variable costs, and where can we maybe save here, save there. Or maybe it's not so much about saving, but just making sure that the money that we're putting in actually does offer enough of a return that it's worth it. It's always interesting to me, though, is that like this is where planning for the long term pays off, because on some of our fertility decisions, you can sort of build levels in years where maybe fertilizer's more affordable, or where crop prices were good. But for a lot of people on rented ground, that's really the hardest part, I think, is that if you don't know that you've got ground long term, it's hard to manage it for the long term on some of these decisions. So I really do feel for like, you've obviously got to feed a crop, but for some of these products and some of these nutrients that hang around a while, you've got to make sure that you're not shorting the crop, but you also, you may not be able to reap the benefit in 2 or 3 years from what you put on. So you do have to like balance all of that.
So Kelvin, a couple things out of that I've been discussing with audiences is the separation in financial health between farms that are mainly rented versus farmland that is owned. You look at the housing market. And the average first-time home buyer age in North America continues to creep higher because of affordability issues. And the majority of for sure, Canadians, their wealth is generated by the equity growth in their home. And farms are kind of the same, asset rich, cash poor. And so I think Lyndsey makes a very good point there.
Yeah, certainly. And I think there's also a scale factor here, or a nimbleness factor where farms that can take maybe the logistics side of fertilizer application and managing some of these costs at scale, there's advantages there that favor farms that do that well, whether it's on-farm storage or whether it's having the ability to apply it yourselves rather than relying on a retailer and a supply chain in spring during the rush of spring and maybe not getting the right timing or the proper product that you're looking for, or that type of thing. I think farms that do that well and efficiently, certainly, and I think those that don't do it well, this is the time when they're really focusing on that, or should be focusing on how to manage some of these costs and manage them efficiently, that side of things, especially on the fertilizer, being, like you said, such a large part of that input cost pie.
Well, and the other thing with all of this is if we do see that ad hoc, bridge package from USDA in early December. Now, the number keeps declining. At one time they were talking about 12 to 13 billion. I think now they're in like the 7 to 9 range. Details to come from Secretary Rollins in early December. But putting money in, and how that's dispersed is going to be a really critical point. Mm-hmm. But that money goes out into the market. That's going to help provide some buoyancy to fertilizer too, and that again works back to the Canadian producer. So there's another dot connection for people to understand how that policy development in the U.S. and that decision trying to provide some bridge money for producers that are really being hammered in different sectors in the U.S. that has an impact back in if you're farming in Swift Current. So yeah, one thing that has died down a little bit, and I did have a couple of people ask about it this week, Kelvin, is assistance for canola growers, for example, because of tariffs. Is that sort of quieted down off the table, or is that still really alive? People asking that question.
Oh, I don't know. I think it's still out there. I'm not sure. Maybe the pressure isn't on right now, but or maybe it hasn't changed. I think that is still something that if you talk to the farm group representatives that go to Ottawa or are in Ottawa, I think they would still say that they're looking for something on that front. But yeah, I don't know whether it certainly, there was no mention of it around the budget. I don't see a lot of even receptiveness from the federal government in terms of even talking about it.
Okay, Lyndsey?
So interestingly, yesterday on the show, Rob Stone at Davidson mentioned something I hadn't really thought about, and this does tie in with some of the budget and bottleneck, et cetera, that wheat was moving incredibly well, probably because not a lot of canola is moving, which I hadn't really thought about that from the logistics side, that, rail movement for at least some crops has gone incredibly well. Exactly that, probably because we've got a volume that's not moving. Not saying none is, but volume has probably throttled back. And that brings us around to, of course, talking about the bottlenecks on logistics, et cetera. And Kelvin, you shared a story this week. I forget which day it was because this week is a blur. But Nutrien deciding on where they were going to put their terminal. And it looks like it's the U.S., which that's got to be a blow.
It's going to happen. It's going to happen in the state of Washington, and we're going to have to leave that for the bonus here on the show, Lyndsey. That's a really good segue. We're going to talk about this decision by Nutrien to build this export terminal in Washington State, not in British Columbia, the why of it, and how regulation and Canada not fixing an infrastructure issue may have be a bit of a factor in that. If you have any feedback, send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio, and we'll chat again next week. Cheers, everybody. And we're in the bonus segment here on RealAg Radio. We used to do a ag media roundtable. Remember that, Lyndsey? Back in the old days of Real Agriculture?
That was a long time ago.
Andrew Campbell was on it, and he was working for farms.com at the time. And I remember...
I was working for Grain News.
You were working for Grain News, and I can remember I had this vision of... and I remember this. Driving from Red Deer to Lethbridge, back from Agritrade, and I had this idea driving home. And it was that the Ag Media Roundtable would be this kind of like getting Ag Media together to talk about issues, kind of what the RealAg Issues Panel is talking about, but we do it internally.
Yeah.
And I remember the opening. I wanted to. We created this like old school, like it was like a news program from the 50s, and I remember the opening was like, "You're listening to the Ag Media Roundtable on RealAgriculture.com." And I'm not sure where that voice came
find
from.
It on YouTube.
Yeah, it's still out there. It is grainy as hell, you guys. It is when a webcam was basically looking through like a bottom of a shot glass. It was so bad.
Yeah.
So bad.
Yeah.
Okay, Kelvin, talk about this Nutrien facility. What is Nutrien doing?
They're building they've been coming up with this plan to build a new export terminal off the West Coast to send potash from Saskatchewan, from its mines in Saskatchewan, to Asian markets and overseas. And this week it was announced, and Globe and Mail had some good coverage on it, that they have chosen Washington. I don't have the article right in front of me right now, so I can't say exactly where in Washington this export terminal will be built, but not in British Columbia, as we've talked about in the past. Issues around the rail bridges through Vancouver and some of the logistics there, bottlenecks there, were likely a factor in Nutrien not choosing the Port of Vancouver. Although it should also be noted, Nutrien does have a large export terminal in Vancouver already, so there is already a lot that goes through there. But this expansion, or this new facility going south of the border, and probably also political reasons for that as well, in terms of some of the protectionist signals that the Trump administration has sent over the last year.
Well, but from a potash perspective, a lot of potash is, and I learned this when I was at that Allen mine with Nutrien just over a year ago, I guess, was when I was doing that. I guess one of the questions is it going to be, because I was wondering what the railways would in Canada, like CN and CPKC would think about this. Like, are they hauling it almost all the way to the Canadian coast and then dipping south, or is this potash that's dipping in on the BN south of Regina and then going across Montana into Washington? Very kind of interesting in terms of how that flow is going to work. Like, is this an increased volume for Canadian railways, or is this good for the BNSF?
I'm not sure where that's at. My understanding was it was crossing further west into the U.S. than at Northgate onto the BN. But and that could change depending on market factors as this all develops.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The article did say that the company went through something like 30 different points that they evaluated, and this Washington site just consistently scored better. So these are the things we have to deal with.
Well, right? And I guess, and I know I saw some people posting on social media like some headline outrage in terms of like how, but I guess also it's also not the end of it's not like the end of, it's not like a massive issue either. Like I'm trying to reconcile it to the level of it's okay, to this is a real concern. To me, it just feels a little bit more like leverage for people pushing for infrastructure development in Canada, to use it as an example. Like, hey, this should have been here. Why is it there? We need what are the barriers, right? I think that's kind of what it is.
Yeah, and potash is an incredibly, incredibly important export, but it is an export commodity that needs to get out the door efficiently, and Nutrien doing well and making good financial decisions will be good for Canadian ventures. So yes, I think that it's one of those sort of missed opportunities, but I think to your point, Shaun, exactly that. This becomes a really good example of here's where Canada fell off this list for being a preferred place to put it. So here's what we're losing by potentially not addressing those points, right? So I do think it becomes it's not good news, but I don't think it's the worst news ever.
It's still export revenue for Canada, whether it leaves
exactly.
via a train crossing or via the port. Exactly. the investment in the infrastructure in Vancouver, the jobs in Vancouver, and certainly runs counter to the narrative that the Carney government has set up, that they are working on developing domestic infrastructure for export and that type of thing. In Port of Vancouver, we know in Western Canadian agriculture how important it is. The other thing that we haven't talked about here is labor unrest and the factor that may have played into this as well, with the strikes that we've seen at the port and at the railways over the last decade or 2 decades, and how that impacts where companies invest their money as well. And to me, that could be something that the Carney government should also be looking at addressing here, reducing that uncertainty for potential investment.
Yeah, it's not like they're moving the potash mine.
No,
right?
Well, it's heavy. I don't know that they could.
Well, and this is also why Scott Moe, the Premier of Saskatchewan, had those meetings with Greer and Lutnick and Besant this week. Potash. That's the reason he got that. Like, potash is a huge card that not only Saskatchewan but Canada can play in all of this.
25% of the fertilizer that is used in the United States is imported. 85% of the potash that is used in the U.S. comes from the province of Saskatchewan.
Yeah.
I think on nitrogen, Canada is, I think, 25% of imports, but I can't remember the total import number. It's not a majority. I think it's like 70. Yeah. I shouldn't.
Not a majority, but it's not insignificant either, I'd say.
That's right.
Yeah.
It is important, but it's not the heavy hammer that potash is. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Quickly, Kelvin, is there anything else we didn't chat about this week?
Oh man, I felt ill prepared for today's show. I'll say that now at the end of the show, podcast version. So I don't have my regular list of topics to talk about. And
okay.
That's so. Yeah. We covered a lot.
Yeah. There was a football game on Sunday. Apparently,
we can forget about that. We don't have to talk about that.
Were you cheering for the Alouettes, Kelvin?
There was no.
Oh, I wasn't cheering for anybody, but I was cheering for the city of Winnipeg and Manitoba, and I think the province and city showed well in general in terms of the Grey Cup. But congratulations to all the Riders fans out there.
Yeah, that's right. So there was that one. I'm trying to look at our list. There was a lot of stuff. But
I'm okay if you don't cheer for your heated rival. I have you know what? Like, some people were like, "Oh, Manitoba, you can't cheer for the Riders." Even like you're cheering for Montreal.
Sure, you can.
Of course, it's your heated rival. I have no problem for people. If you have a heated rival, like, stop with this. Like, it's like when the Flames and the Oilers were in the finals together, where it's like, oh, you got to cheer for the Alberta team. I do not. No. No. It's okay. We can have rivalries. It's healthy.
It's okay. So to Kelvin's point, so Winnipeg did well. Though they did
not in the football game, not where we would.
I thought as a host.
What was our thought on Machine Gun Kelly? I actually thought it was pretty good.
Did not watch it.
Yeah, I don't know whether
I was surprised.
I think he did okay, but it's a.
You wanted Anne Murray? Katie
Lang, still alive, by the way.
She is alive.
Okay.
Because I think I told this story where I was on RFD TV one morning and Suzanne was like, "Hey, big night at the Opry on Tuesday," and I was like, "Oh, really? What they did? There was like Canadians representing in the house at the Opry. They did a big celebration of Anne Murray. She said it was fantastic. And
then you were Googling, "Is Anne Murray alive?"
Is Anne Murray alive? Yeah.
In a different genre, though, but Canadian, and performed at the Opry recently. William Prince, new album, has a new album out from Manitoba. He performed at the Opry last week.
Zero clue who that is.
There you go.
Well, you should look him up. Check him out.
Yeah, you have
Great
lots
voice.
of things to look up after this. Yeah.
If you're a Coulter Wall fan, I'd say.
Oh, really? Oh, it's in that genre.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
He's folksy. It's good. Good music.
I've been hearing good things about Coulter Wall's new album.
See?
But he's biased, but his dad, Brad, was saying I think it's his best. So just, I put that in there. Go ahead, Kelvin.
His dad, Brad Wall.
Going back to your question and about anything we didn't cover and potash, BHP actually opened a new North American headquarters in Saskatchewan this week. So that's also significant in terms of, that's a company from Australia that's made, I believe, the largest private investment ever in Saskatchewan's history into the province of Saskatchewan here over the last number of years for potash development. So, that's the type of thing that the Carney government right now seems to be shifting priority to attracting that type of investment. And he was in the UAE Yesterday,
right,
the Prime Minister announced some deal that is going to see billions of dollars of investment apparently come into Canada from the UAE. So I didn't hear any talk about canola crush, though, which it's something that we need to follow up on. How much of our canola is going into the UAE for crush right now?
Yeah. You know, one thing we didn't chat about today that I ran out of time was the U.S.-China stuff. And I'm really fascinated by what happens on soybeans here. Soybeans and canola are kind of in the same like boat with China. Well, they're not in the boat because nothing's being shipped. And
we need sound effects.
If China doesn't step up and this 12 million metric tons in November, December is not real, which it's real slow pace. If now it's like maybe it's December, January, and in Q1 25 is like super slow, 25 million metric tons. I don't want to talk in code here. Sorry. I'm curious what happens to soybean planting. Like, is there a little bit of an indicator there? Don't plant beans because like I find it a very fascinating question.
Futures market soybeans have over the last couple of weeks here shown more bullishness than any other commodity.
And they don't need nitrogen. So this is the other part, is that if nitrogen prices are through the roof, that brings soybean acres up.
Like the demand is in corn. Like that's where the demand story has been really positive.
There's a lot. Sure.
Right? You just don't want to end up like cotton, where cotton, the losses are terrible at the farm level. And China's not buying it. 80% of the crop is a China crop, and they don't know what they're going to do with it. Right? Like I'm worried about it. I know the market's saying maybe plant beans, but we'll see where that market goes here. If they still have to sign that deal, right? China has still not acknowledged that deal. There is some big ifs still out there. I don't want to be a negative nanny, but I think that there is some reasons for at least concern in terms of all that getting tied up in a bow being put on it for sure. Okay, we're out of time here in the bonus. Kelvin, have yourself a great weekend.
Thank you. Take care, all.
Lyndsey, the same.
Bye, everybody.
Okay, encourage everybody, go to RealAgriculture.com. There's so many stories that we're writing about, interviews that we're doing that do not make it on the show. RealAg Radio is great. We appreciate you listening to the podcast, but we do more than just this show. So please check out RealAgriculture.com, our YouTube channel, or our podcast feed, especially the fire hose. Like it is that is like a 5-inch pipe just blasting at you with content. Everybody have yourselves a great weekend. Cheers, everybody.